Our guest today is Brian Burke, President of Hockey Operations, Calgary Flames of the National Hockey League. As a general manager in the National Hockey League, Mr. Burke's experience extended to over 1,100 games with Hartford, Vancouver, Anaheim, and Toronto. Our guest served as Vice President and Director of Hockey Operations at the National Hockey League for over 5 years. He guided the Anaheim Ducks to a Stanley Cup in 2007. He was a finalist for the Hockey News Executive of the Year in 2006, ranked number 1 by the Hockey News annual GM rankings in 2008. Our guest was an original member of the U.S. Men's National Team Advisory Group that was founded in 2007 to assist USA Hockey. In 2008, our guest was recognized for his outstanding service to hockey in the United States and was awarded the prestigious Lester Patrick Award. Our guest is well known for his work in the community. He's a vocal activist against homophobia in sports, a strong supporter of first response personnel, military service members, environmentalist, humanitarian. In honor of his late son, Brendan, our guest has been a spokesperson for the You Can Play project since it was founded by his son, Patrick, in 2011. Our guest was born in Providence, Rhode Island, and he's a graduate of Providence College and a graduate of Harvard Law in 1981. He's a former professional hockey player himself. He lends his name and his time to numerous charities throughout Canada and the United States. Welcome, Brian Burke.
That's too long an intro. It'd be nice if I could have kept some of these jobs a little longer, then it wouldn't be. I have the NHL record for most teams where I've been a GM, including Calgary, where I was acting GM. That's 5. That's a dubious honor.
Oh, it's a distinguished career. But tell us, share with the viewers who are watching our program, what does the President of Hockey Operations Calgary Flames really mean? What does it entail?
Well, I think it's an important question because it is a relatively new phenomenon in pro sports. You know, in the old days, the general manager was God, and that was it. You had a team president that ran the business side, and then you had a general manager, and on hockey matters, that guy was God. This gives the GM a boss. It puts a layer of authority in between ownership and the GM. My job is to supervise our GM, Brad Treliving, to assist him, try and do as much of the corporate stuff as I can so it frees him up to just look for hockey players. But this is something, there was only one team in hockey that had this, and one team in football and one team in basketball a couple years ago, and now there's a half dozen in each. And I think it will be pretty standard procedure within the next couple of years for most teams.
But your background, when you were the GM for many, many years of various teams in Hartford and Toronto and Anaheim, you would have had to deal a lot of different contracts, would you not?
Yes, negotiate a lot of contracts, a trade is usually a protracted negotiation, but coaching contracts, international contracts, a lot of negotiating in my background.
What sort of preparation would you have to do in terms of lining up a particular player that you want to negotiate, his agent, I would presume, the league, etc.?
Well, I think it's critical that you go into a negotiation with a philosophy. And my philosophy in negotiation is, one, I want to pay a player what's fair. Not a penny more than what's fair, but I don't want to get him cheaply. And I've never worked for an owner who said, you know what, let's get that guy as cheap as we can. All the owners I've worked for shared that philosophy, which is we want to be fair. Now, the problem with fair is a range. You know, the player's idea what's fair and your idea what's fair is seldom the same. So for me, it was, we want to be fair. The key to the whole thing is your preparation. So you got to come in with comparables. So if we say David Dingwall, 20 goals last year, right winger, 217 penalty minutes, 14, 15 minutes time on ice, we can run a filter on the computer and say, all right, give us 3 comparable players. And those players make $2 million, $1.8 million, and $1.6 million. So what's fair? $1.8 million probably. So the preparation is the key. You've got to be prepared. You have to have a professional style. I don't bang on the table and curse and yell. This is what we have to offer you. I can support it. I don't have to apologize for it. And I think that's the key. You have no chance of making a deal if you do it any other way with me. If you don't come in prepared, you don't come in with a fair number, we're not making a deal.
Are there other things other than just the number that play a factor in terms of making an arrangement? What would that list of things look like?
Well, it's a short list of things we pay for. Positive attitude, coachability, leadership skills, work ethic. These are all things where a player, he might only have, like a player might only have 17 goals for you, but lead your team in hits, lead your team in penalty minutes, lead your team in fights. That guy has value. Is he a disciple, a guy that coaches trust and like? Can you put him first in drills? And we got a lot of players who can't switch drills. You switch a drill, you got to make sure the guy in the front of the line knows the new drill. You got drill killers out there. Is this guy a drill killer? Or is he an intelligent player? Does he treat his teammates respectfully? There are a lot of things that we pay for and pay extra for other than just performance. For example, your captain, you usually pay a premium to your captain because he's your leader. But yes, there's a lot more than just numbers. This isn't baseball.
So how long would it take you to develop that dossier for that particular individual? And, you've done many, many, many of those individuals, so pretty onerous.
Yeah, well, it is and it isn't. Most players, we have an internal chart with boxes. So for the 12 forwards, there's 12 boxes. So your first line left wing, you're looking for elite skill, first power play. Second line left wing, one of those wingers, we want size and bite. Third line center, be a penalty killing guy that can shut people down and chip in a little bit. So we have these boxes, and we basically identify, okay, so there's 7 players really that are just like you. The computer can spit out the comparables in seconds. And so we'd say, all right, run the filters on anyone with 15 goals. So we'll catch a couple guys that were just below this player. 250 PIMs, instead if he was at 270, we'll catch a couple guys. And it'll spit out 8 profiles. It'll say, here are the guys he's like. And generally, we know who those guys are anyway. Here's what they make. Then you sit down, figure out the intangibles, you draft your offer, you present it to the agent. I think the presentation's important rather than just emailing, here's what we think is fair. Support it, give the rationale for it, and then see if you can make a deal.
You would make a presentation?
Yeah, the club has to make an offer. So you make your qualifying offers on June 30th or whatever the date is in the CBA. So for players to retain their rights, you have to make a qualifying offer, and that is typically done without any fanfare. You just email it to the agent, copy to the union, copy to the league. But when you actually are trying to sign a player, I would always go in and sit down with the agent, preferably at his office. Most GMs or assistant GMs won't go to the enemy's office. They make the agent come to them. I always thought it was a sign of respect that I would go to their office, present the offer. Here's what we're prepared to offer, and here's why. Present the rationale. You have a way better chance if the agent feels he's being treated respectfully and understands the supporting arguments. You have a way better chance of making a deal.
Tell us about the agent-player relationship and the relationship between the GM, agent, and player.
Well, an agent, and when I was a lawyer, I represented some players, and I think the agent acquires a place in a player's family or in his life that's almost comparable to being a family member. These guys, these hockey players, will often ask you for advice before they ask their dad for advice, because you're the one with the expertise and you're the one who's gotten into their circle. It's a very important relationship. We've never tried to damage that relationship. We have had situations where we think the agent's acting, in a manner that's not really in the player's best interest, but we think the relationship's important. So I've got to find a way for my players to think that I respect their agent, even if I might be having a difference with one or more of them. We're fortunate that most of the guys in the agent business are honest, ethical guys, at least in our sport. And so it's a lot of moving parts to winning a championship and keeping a team together, and that's one of them. Is treating the agents respectfully and not trying to get in between them and their player.
Have you ever had a situation where the agent-player relationship, in the midst of their contract, was very difficult, a lot of tension, and how would you handle that?
Almost like an intervention where you call a player in and say, look, we're not going to be able to deal with this guy. So you've got a choice to make. Either you get rid of this guy or, we're going to get you out of here. And sometimes, very seldom, because their players are very loyal. It's never worked where they said, okay, I'll fire my agent. I've never had that happen. I have had guys do it after some reflection. But what it generally does is you kind of air things out. You can usually sort it out, or if it's too difficult, you just get rid of the player. You just trade the player.
The reputation that Brian Burke has is that he's a pretty trustworthy guy.
Correct.
I would think that many players would say that, other GMs would say that, people in the hockey world. What do you look for in terms of trust on the other side?
To me, if you're going to be a guy that deals with me, and the agent business is repetitive, because if you're successful, like Newport Sports is the biggest, I think. They've got 120 guys in the NHL, I think, or 150. So I'm going to see them again. So if they come in and do a poor job on a guy, then it's only a matter of time before I get a chance to pay them back on a different player. So everyone has a real high stake in acting properly all the time, because it is a merry-go-round. The guy, and I've said this to agents. I said, I'm going to have another guy in this organization, and I'm going to tell him that I'm putting the boots to him, and I'm going to tell him it's because of you. And so everyone has a high stake. The agent has a lot to lose by not being honest and ethical. I have a lot to lose. So I think most of the behaviors are, in fact, professional, educated, civil. And so, yeah, trustworthy to me, come in prepared, be completely transparent with your player, tell them everything we said. If things are said in the heat of battle that are negative about your player, filter those if you would, because some of them are like, hey, your player's a coward. We're not going to pay what we pay a guy who's brave. Well, we don't really want the player to hear that, but it might be something you say in a room. Arbitration settings are very difficult for that reason. But so there's plenty of incentive for everyone to do this right. And my experience has been overwhelmingly positive with in this business.
But has that always been the way in the NHL, or has that evolved over the years?
No, this the famous story is when Jim Ringo brought an agent in to negotiate with Vince Lombardi. And this was, when you had representation back then, it was very rare. And Jim Ringo was in his office and he said, I don't want you to talk to me. I've brought my lawyer. It's Brian Burke. And Vince Lombardi said, excuse us. And he went outside, he came back in, he said, you should be negotiating with the Philadelphia Eagles, where I just traded your client, just over the fact of having an agent. But much like player representation by lawyers and agents, much like the emergence of players' associations, we expect it now. We think that the agents can provide a useful service. Once the deal is done, the agent and team management and players should all be exactly in line on what's next. Does this player need to get stronger? We don't like rookies doing commercials. We try and let them get comfortable in the marketplace first. We like young players to bill it, to live with a family. If an 18-year-old makes their team, we make them live with a family. And we don't think they're ready for the NHL and all that comes with it right away, so we put them in a family situation. But the agents that are smart realize now the deal's done, okay, however much fighting there was. We'll dust off our hands and say, now, what are all of our interests now? And all of our interests should be aligned very closely. We all want this player to be successful.
So the agent does play a role throughout the duration of that contract to cement certain things which are important, A, for the player and for the team.
Yes. So we can call an agent up and say, look, your client, your player is 6 pounds overweight. And we'll take him out of the lineup till he loses that weight. But in the meantime, you can tell him to eat a little more sensibly. Some of the young players haven't mastered nutrition yet, and their weight will yo-yo, and we'll have to work with them on that. So, but the agent has a role there, again, of the stuff we want the player to do is so that he'll be more successful. It's not to punish him or to make him fail. We want him to be successful. And that could be diet, it could be work ethic and practice, could be lifestyle issues, could be girlfriends, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of minefields for a player.
Now, would you say that this is typical of all NHL teams, or is this the Brian Burke in Anaheim, the Brian Burke in Hartford, in Toronto, and now in Calgary?
No, I'd say it's across the board. to me, I think, like you say, it was kind of an evolution where agents were like, I remember when I represented players, even then, you weren't very welcome in some of the buildings. But I think now it's emerged where, okay, this is the industry we're in. It's a mature industry. The agents have a role. Let's treat them like they have a role and treat them sensibly and respectably and respectfully, and let's make this work. So I think overall the system works.
What's the Brian Burke communication style? Let's talk about as a GM or even as a president of hockey operations. Are you a text guy? Are you an email guy? Are you have to have a meeting, telephone? What's the communication style that you bring to your deliberations?
Well, to me, it's a combination of all those things. I think they're face-to-face meetings are essential, I think. Like when I used to have a major player to sign, like I say, I would go and present the offer in person at the agent's office. I think that's critical, that level of respect. No one else does it. But I know that the agents and lawyers all appreciated that. And I think it helped us get deals done. So to me, the in-person meeting is always more powerful. If we're going to have a situation where we want to confront a player on something that would be done in person, we would invite the agent if we had time to. But texting, I think, is a good way to prepare for meetings. If you text and say, by the way, take a look at this guy's contract he just signed yesterday, it would have an influence on where we are today. I think texting has a role. I think email has a role. I think you got to figure out what the lawyer or the agent on the other side likes best too. Some of these things are confrontational. Like I say, I've only had one player salary arbitration in my whole career. And that's because my teams have a different rule. If you file for arbitration with me, we're going arbitration. Whereas most people view it as just another step in the process, preserve your rights, and continue to meet. Not with me. You file, we're going. At that moment, all negotiations cease. We hire the law firm, and we'll see you at the arbitration. So I've only had one. Most of my deals have settled before the player files.
You don't have to give names, but in that particular situation, was it a very difficult? Was there tension?
Yeah.
Player, agent? Could you elaborate?
No, I would tell a story. It's Brendan Morrison, who's a great kid and has settled in Calgary as a friend of mine. I had him in Vancouver, and he centered the big line, the West Coast Express, with Todd Bertuzzi and Marcus Naslund. His agent felt that he was the guy that made that line work. We had a different view, and it was a very tense and difficult arbitration. And I said to Brendan, I said, look, Mo, you're the one who started this fight. You filed. So you're the one who asked me out in the alley, so you can't complain now if you get kicked in the groin in the process. So yes, it was very tense. We made up right after we agreed we'd be buddies, and he's a great guy and played very well for us. But no, there's parts of this business that are not easy or fun.
As the president of hockey operations, have you encountered difficult people? And if so, how do you deal with difficult people?
Well, we have real simple dispute resolution methods in hockey. The players will often sort things out on the ice, like even teammates. So if they got a beef, they'll fight. They'll sort it out on the ice. I can't recommend that as a practice through the rest of the industrialized parts of Canada, but it works really well in our business. And that is truly how two guys get in a beef, have a problem, they'll often sort it out that way. I think in our business, if you're having a problem with a player, we call them in, and it's very confrontational. There's a lot of bad language used in our business, more probably than we need, but that's sometimes if you don't curse, the players don't think you're serious. If you said, my young man, I do wish you'd try harder, that's probably not going to have the same effect as a coach getting right in his face and cursing at him. So it's unique industry that way. If any of your students are thinking of getting into pro sports, they should learn to curse with great fervor and fluency.
And passion.
And passion. And profanity is a marvelous thing. You can use it as adverbs, adjectives, nouns, verbs. But I think, we're very direct with our players. What we try to do, the balance I have struck with my players, is they'll know I'll do anything for them. I'll go through a wall for them. I'll back them up publicly. Anyone who's after in the media goes after those players in the media. Generally, I go right after the media. And I spend my quiet time with the players before practice. So practice is at 10:30. They'll start drifting in around 8:45. and I'll be down in the dressing room with my coffee. How's the baby doing? How's your wife doing? I know she was taking a class. Did she finish that? And get to know the players and make sure they know that you care about their lives, that you're keenly interested in what they're doing and how they're doing. And that's how I build my alliances with my players. And that's where they'll tell you if something's wrong. So that's that quiet time between 8:45 and 9:30, and then head back upstairs. So,
has the player changed in the NHL over the years? I mean, you hear about the baby boomers and their children, they're spoon-fed, et cetera, et cetera. Has that athlete changed in terms of their approach to hockey and a whole host of things that go with it?
yes, but only slightly. We're so blessed in our league with the athlete we get. This game is so hard to play. It's the hardest game to play by a mile. It's the hardest sport to master by a mile. And you see people argue with, say, well, what about, baseball? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like everything our athletes do, every other athlete's expected to do it. Pass, shoot, defend, score. Our guys do it on a piece of steel 1/4 inch wide. The skating part of what we do, the difficulty of it is that there are 2 skating events in the Olympics. That's how hard skating is. It's worthy of a gold medal in 2 different disciplines. And so it's so hard that the kid we get has to put in so much time. His family has to make a major commitment because it's expensive and it's tournaments and going to practice. These kids can't walk to practice. Someone has to get up and drive them at 5:30 in the morning, like my dad did. And so the family makes a commitment, and the kids we get tend to be humble and grateful for what they've gotten, and they've had to work so hard. So the industry, the sport itself, causes a lot of the traits we love: humility and patience and hard work ethic and pain threshold. So we're lucky. We had a marvelous kid. Are they as tough as they were back when I played? No. But my grandpa would tell you that we weren't as tough as he was. So I still think we get an exceptional athlete with a high tolerance for pain and a great work ethic.
Social media, the impact it's had on our players, on the league, and as the president of hockey operations.
I tweet. I don't do it myself. I have my daughter do it, but they are my tweets. I had no interest in doing Twitter, and then when I was running the Leafs, they asked me to do it. The team asked me to do it. Sometimes I still wonder at the whole concept where people tweet what they just had for dinner. I don't follow anyone, so I don't know, but I know someone will show me a tweet. This guy said, I just had this dinner at this place. I'm like, you're kidding me, right? Like, I care what you had for dinner? So I don't get it. With athletes, they've got to be real careful. And I've advised our players to have someone else do it, have your agent do it, or a girlfriend or something, just so there's some barrier between you and an angry response or a couple of beers and a response. So, you can complain about these things, and they've gotten players in trouble, but they're talking about the game. The day that people don't care about hockey, we're all out of work. So this is engaged for our younger fans. This is how they stay in the game. This is how they follow it. I think we have to adapt to the technology that the next generation wants. I don't think they have to adapt to us.
Is there a policy in the NHL in terms of the do's and don'ts of social media if you're a player?
Yeah, you're not allowed to tweet on game days. Anything inappropriate. They just suspended 2 players in the Ontario Hockey League for improper commentary on Twitter. Our players know darn well if they said something was racist or homophobic, they will face discipline from the National Hockey League. So yes, there is a social media policy negotiated between the NHL and the NHL Players Association. We expect our players to follow that, and the league certainly does.
And do they enforce it on a regular basis?
Oh yeah.
Good. Yeah.